Oh, China economic policies. Oh, right. Sorry.
Can wait there.
Well, you might want to ask your question and I'll answer it.
Sam Jameson, freelance. Many years ago, Taiwan exercised limits on investment in the mainland, particularly Fujian province. I don't believe there are any limits now. What is the amount of Taiwan investment in Fujian? And essentially, don't you own the province of Fujian already?
Right. I mean, this question is somehow related to the previous question of this trade agreement that we signed with China. So I can answer both questions at the same time. No, things have changed a lot from the time that you got this impression that there was a lot of limits on investment in China. It was during the time that when DPP was in the government in 2000 to 2008, we changed the legal infrastructure for regulating trade and investment with China to a structure that is consistent with the WTO requirement. Because that's a Taiwanese song.
It's a wonderful one. Keep it.
But cheer us all up while we're talking about this very serious subject. All right.
Mr. Ma has sent this.
He apparently wants to cheer us up. Right, where were we? Oh, we're talking about changing the legal structure for regulating this cross-strait trade and investment. So while we're in the government in 2000 to 2008, we changed the whole structure to a structure that is consistent with the WTO requirement. Bearing in mind, though, we acceded to the WTO in year 2001. So before we took over the government, that is before 2000, year 2000, the KMT did have this policy of 3 no's, that is essentially no contact with China. And they pursued a policy that is restrictive towards trade and investment in China. But after 2001, after our accession to the WTO, we changed the whole legal structure to a structure that is consistent with the WTO requirements, that is a structure that would facilitate gradual liberalization of trade and investment across the Taiwan Strait. So today, the situation is very different. There is a lot of investment in China. It's not limited to Fujian, and we don't own Fujian. It is still part of part of China, and the trade volume has grown to an extent that trade with China represents almost 40–50% of our external trade. And China is our largest investment destination at the moment. I think 70 or 80% of our outward investment goes to China. So China has become the largest investment destination and trade partner of Taiwan now. So when I was talking about building a foundation and basis to provide a framework for the relationship, I was talking about the complexity of the relationship. This is a very complex trade and investment relationship that we have with China now. So going back to that agreement that we signed with China, the Ma government signed with China. Look, we are a country and a democracy, and in a democracy, government or government changes. And when government changes, you need to make sure one thing, that is when you have a deal with a foreign party, you have to be cautious. That is, you have to maintain certain amount of consistency and continuity. So we're not in a position to abolish whatever that the Mao government signed with China, but we would, as a matter of continuity, we would continue these agreements, but we would look at these agreements carefully again to see whether there are things that need to be changed. If there are things that need to be changed, we'll go through the internal democratic process to get the approval required for making changes.
Wang Xiaopeng from Xinhua News Agency. What's your stance on U.S. arms sales? And that is the second question. How would you deal with it if you are elected next year? Thank you.
Well, I think U.S. deals with this according to this special legislation they have. And we deal with this arms sale or procurement issue according to our defense needs. And bearing in mind that we have to build our own military capability, the purpose of this exercise is to defend ourselves. And therefore, if there's a need to strengthen our defense capability, we look to the United States and others who are able and willing to supply us with the whatever military weapons that we need. And in addition to this armed procurement, we would also talk to people in the region, or people who have interest in this region, to form common strategies with an aim to maintain a stable and peaceful relationship with China, and also to maintain peace and stability in this part of the world.
Dennis Engbarth from Enterprise Service in Taiwan. One issue which you mentioned in your talk, but not in much detail, was the question of nuclear power in the wake of the Fukushima accident. Now, you've come out with a very clear position to end use of nuclear power in Taiwan by 2025 and not allow number 4 to operate. But this position is not sensed as being adequate by environmental groups in Taiwan, which hope that that can be pushed up as since for a variety of reasons. At the same time, even though this accident occurred in Japan, it seems that the Japanese government and the Japanese political parties have themselves not really decided very clearly on what to do about nuclear power in Japan. So I was wondering whether you're going to have some exchanges, or how do you sort of look at that issue from the standpoint of from Taiwan's perspective. Secondly, on the question of cross-straits policy, civic groups in Taiwan have pushed for the implementation or the passage of special legislation to govern the formation of cross-straits agreement, which would include much more civic monitoring and perhaps referral to referendum for major agreements. And I was wondering what your policy was on that, and whether or not the ECFA should be subject, or since if you're in government, you cannot, according to the referendum law, initiate a referendum, but whether your government would, as the KMT government has, block civic groups from filing a referendum petition.
The 2025 nuclear-free project that we propose is a very careful thought that we have gone through. That is, by 2025, we would retire the existing 3 power plants, and which are in operation at the moment. And our intention is not to let the fourth nuclear plant to start. So this is the way that we plan to deal with this nuclear plant issue. I understand that the environmentalists in Taiwan want to have a more ambitious timetable for phasing out nuclear power in Taiwan, but given the fact that the alternative energy supply now at the moment in Taiwan is very low, it's less than 1%. We need to develop enough alternative energy resources in order to fulfill our needs for power supply. So we need time to change the industrial structure towards a structure that requires less electricity consumption, and we need to sort of improve the efficiency of this traditional power generation capability in Taiwan. And we need time to change the way people conduct their household and their livings, so that they would be adapting themselves to an energy-saving lifestyle. And then we need time to build an industry that will produce the alternative energy, especially in the biofuel or and the solar power area. So we need time, actually. And from now to 2012, it's only about 13 years. So it's a very ambitious timetable for us, but we need to make a commitment. Once we make a commitment, we have to make our best effort to achieve that goal that we have set for the Taiwan society. Now, about this special statute, I don't know whether we have a need for that special statute at the moment. The important thing is that we have to get people together to go through a democratic process to build consensus. If the consensus is that we need to have a special legislation, and then we go for a special legislation. If the consensus is just that we don't need a special statute at the moment, then we don't need to go through that process of having a special statute. So it's very much depend on how what sort of result we have once we have this, after we have this Taiwan consensus process. So I would say at the moment that it might be too early to talk about special legislations and what should be included in this special legislation. But the important thing is that we need to get people to agree that a process, consensus building.
Top achievements. As a politician, as a citizen of your country, as a woman, as a person, how do you feel the contradiction that if you are going to become the president of Taiwan, you won't be able to go abroad anymore? I mean, you could not visit Europe, you could not visit many countries. You are becoming the top politician, but you will be actually in jail. I mean, in Europe you can visit only the Vatican. And even the Vatican is giving signs that they're just waiting for some little sign from Beijing, and they will divulge. Your personal feelings about it. It's not politics. It's really personal.
Well, politicians are not used to tell people in public their feelings. But I will tell you though, yeah, it's sad for not being able to travel once you become the president of Taiwan. And this is a political reality that every Taiwanese president has to face. But what is more important for a Taiwanese president is that he or she has to insist on the principles that are essential to the integrity of the people in Taiwan, and that are essential for the protection of the sovereignty of Taiwan. So if I am given the opportunity to travel as a president to Japan with the condition that I have to accept certain political preconditions which is not acceptable to the majority of the people in Taiwan, then I would rather stay in Taiwan.
As a token of our appreciation for your coming today, as Foreign Pressman Club of Japan, I'm handing you a 1-year honorary membership with the understanding that if you get elected, you can hold this for the next 4 years.
I brought it for 8 years, you know.
Okay, good. We will see to it that it gets renewable every year.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please, I'll remain seated while our guest leaves the room. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
开始